Good evening. Welcome to Green Watch, your locally produced progressive political and social affairs program. I'm your host, Brian Harrison. We have another two-part show for you tonight. Later on in the show, we're going to be discussing electoral strategy for progressives and radicals. We're going to be talking with folks that are supporting the Bernie Sanders campaign for the Democratic nomination for the 2016 presidential election. We'll also be joined by a member of the Harris County Green Party to discuss how progressives might move forward into the 2016 presidential election. We're now going to join our panel here in the studio to discuss electoral strategies for progressives in the 2016 presidential election. With us tonight from the Bernie Sanders campaign is Egberto Willies. He is a blogger and a host of the radio show Politics Done Right on KPFT. We are also joined by Lane Brozgal, who is a moderator for Houston for Sanders. Also with us tonight is Taylor Channing. He is with Bernie 2016 TV. And also with us is Laura Palmer. She is the co-chair of the Green Party of Texas. First, welcome to the program, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
All right, I wanted to start off talking a little bit about Bernie Sanders because while I don't want to say he's a new figure on the national scene, certainly his candidacy has been received as something of a bolt from left field, literally. And it's something that a phrase that he uses is he calls himself a democratic socialist, which in the not so distant future, 5 years ago, the word socialist was being used as an epithet, as something negative. And now it seems like folks are warming to the idea of this democratic socialist running for president. What are our thoughts on that? Taylor?
Go for it. I think that a lot of times people have the misunderstanding of what the socialism generally means, you know, and when you're dealing with the subject of socialism, people don't realize that our roads, our police, our fire departments, our military, all of these things are fundamentally socialist systems because it is just let's gather money and pay for it as a group, you know, as a nation. And so when people do not know what socialism is, then they have a problem with it. When they're told what it is, then all of a sudden, wait a minute, this actually sounds like a pretty good idea because it's just what governments do, you know. So I think that as people have become more aware of what it is and more aware that the negatives against it, that the people who have this rhetoric against it are really just lying to some extent.
So the pejorative nature of it is beginning to fade.
Yeah, I actually think the moniker is just that, a moniker. If you take a look at what democratic socialism is, it is just what we have throughout Europe, even in Canada. It is just the state doing what it's supposed to do in a moral society. Right now we have a laissez-faire type capitalist society, and in this laissez-faire type capitalist society, what we actually see is the suffering of a whole lot of people. People are really suffering, and what we have is because we have a corporate controlled media, the suffering of the people isn't actually seen. People suffer in silence. So what we have is a Bernie Sanders that come out and he says there's a Democratic Party, there is a Republican Party. Both of these parties continue to abide by the system that we have. So I guess I have to be a bit different. What am I? I am a democratic socialist because I care in the social nature of the country. I care about people. I am moral. And I think until we believe that, we have to look at that.
Who cares about this label? I mean, so what if it's a pejorative term?
Right.
I mean, does it really matter that it's being normalized?
It does matter whenever you consider that he's running a national campaign for the largest position that one can have in American politics, arguably. But I think what we're doing, by and large, as an electorate, is understanding democratic socialism based upon its fruits that it's been producing for years in other countries. And Bernie Sanders has been a democratic socialist for years. And we're trying to undo, you know, half a century of stigmatization and false analogs with, you know, people think socialism, they associate it with fascism for some reason. Or they associate it with, you know, radical communism or what have you. And it's just not true.
Laura, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the Green Party espouses a position of economic democracy. Really, how we choose to solve our problems economically is a spectrum, whether we choose something that's a more social solution or something that favors capital more. But right now, the entire political establishment is an obstacle to average people being able to have any input into what our economic system is going to be. And we cannot continue to have a system that excludes mass numbers of people from the economy. It's just not tenable.
And I think that Bernie Sanders might say that he is fighting for the folks that you're talking about, folks that have been carved out of the political process, folks that might not have anybody that's really representing them,
Right.
Particularly in D.C. And he's going around the nation, and he came here to Houston a couple of weeks ago, had several thousand people at a rally. He's had tens of thousands in other places. Why do you think he's tapping into that type of energy?
If I can say something, I look at the people around this table, right? I'm probably the oldest person here. He's tapped into them. And what he has
Tapped into youth.
He has tapped into the youth. He has tapped into those people who have realized that what's there left for me. And here's an older guy saying, I understand that our generations have taken a whole lot from you guys, and they've seen it. And that is a scary part. And I think that is what has the Democratic Party and likely the Republican Party concerned, because they're engaged.
Well, if I can jump in there, I mean, obviously I'm not supporting the Sanders campaign because I am committed to building the Green Party, and it would be inappropriate for me to try to influence another party's primary process. But, you know, I'd do a happy dance if Bernie Sanders won the nomination. But, you know, the Greens want to reach out to people of conscience that Sanders also greatly appeals to and say, you know, whatever the outcome of this nomination process is, you know, we invite you to join us in building a party structure that is an alternative that can continue to deliver these messages that have to get into the political dialogue. And so, yes, but I agree with you. The momentum of the social swell of the movement is there, and it must be answered.
A lot of people might be looking at this primary process and might say, Bernie has no chance at all to get this nomination. I mean, people are talking about Bernie on the outside. An explosive amount of fundraising, $50 million. Hillary Clinton is set to raise $1 billion this electoral, $1 billion for a campaign.
No joke.
How on earth could $50 million?
In the political process, I think that there are fewer and fewer secrets in the way people are being funded for their campaigns. All you have to do is go opensecrets.org or one of these places, and you can see exactly who gives these people money. And when you look at almost any other candidate and then look at Bernie in that situation, what strikes you immediately is that even the big ticket contributors to Bernie's campaign are only giving him like $100,000. You know, you have in some of these other campaigns, they are getting 4, 5, 6, 7 times that amount from one guy or one PAC. You know, so it is the way that it's being financed. I think is now a major concern. I think they're clocking Citizens United as like one of the #1 issues that voters are concerned with right now. So it's a big deal that he's being funded by his voters, by the people who are supporting him, rather than hedge funds. And
So people power, a
People
network
power,
of
exactly.
engaged folks like yourselves working on behalf of his campaign.
Grassroots.
Exactly. I think it's important to note, however, that all that money is being spent to fool people, right? To tell people your vote doesn't matter. The program that I do, what I see everybody around here do, and even the conversations that we have in the green room, it's about letting people know that their vote really matters and money really shouldn't. And so whether they spend it or not, who cares if we can get to them? And with social media that we have now, with the radio shows that we're doing, with programs like yours that we're having here, we can actually make a difference, and we can actually forget about Citizens United, forget about McCutcheon, forget about all these laws that enable the plutocrats to really run the elections. If we can engage people and let people know in their hearts that their vote really matters and they can go out there and really make a difference, then the money is just academic.
And that media is free as well.
No.
I mean,
Social media.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's viral, it's rapid, it's unstoppable. I mean, granted, this is filtered through corporations to get a broad audience, but it's essentially an expression of social democracy.
But we've had candidates that have popped up in specifically the Democratic Party, the Democratic primary, pardon me, in the past. These candidates, people like Dennis Kucinich, people like Jesse Jackson, folks who have popped up trying to carry the banner of the left and the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and they've all failed to capture the nomination.
Somebody has to win sometime.
The zeitgeist is changing.
I do think that it's very true. I think that, yeah, in the past there have been guys who have come up and they've tried to change the conversation and get elected, and none of them really have had the meteoric rise in numbers and support.
I mean,
Bernie has had.
what's the guarantee? And I'm going to go back to times like 68 and 72, when the Democratic establishment said, oh, we're not having somebody on the left in 68, and just took the party over, and in 72 with McGovern just abandoned them, didn't support them. What's to say that the Democratic establishment, if Bernie Sanders wins the candidacy, what's to say that they won't just put him out in the cold?
That could happen.
Hang him out to dry.
That could happen. And here's the funny thing about that you said. I think the group of folks that we have out there now, the people that are out there now, I think are different than then. Because, before I go into that, because Taylor said something that I want to address about social media and the corporations. That is why we have to fight for net neutrality, to make sure that we can never, ever get the social media completely under the control of corporations.
To try to keep corporate influence out. Okay.
Exactly. But as far as your question, how to prevent that from happening, is I think this engagement has to continue, because and it could actually be better, because if let's say the Democratic Party decided to leave one of its own by themselves, and social media and people in general do their part, that makes the party then irrelevant. And the mere fact that it starts to become irrelevant would make it engage, because no party wants to be irrelevant.
So it's got to be continued involvement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I really feel like the Green Party is the blade of that threat. I mean, and I hope that progressives understand that. That if they cannot have the progressive issues addressed inside the Democratic Party, there is another structure that they can support. And I have tremendous confidence in millennials who've grown up in a very sophisticated media environment their whole lives. They understand that packaging and marketing is skin deep, and they can say, look, we're in the market for something else. They were so disappointed. Everyone was so disappointed with Obama and what he's continued. His failure to prosecute torture, the drones, all of the stuff that you could throw out there. At some point, people can just decide. So we don't have to compete with that $1 billion. We have to raise enough to raise an effective brand awareness campaign so that people are aware that the Green Party exists as an option. And so that's why we're all about building bridges at this time.
Laura, you bring up President Obama, and I think that a lot of folks, a lot of progressive folks, and a lot of normal folks, people who might not identify as anything, may be a little bit disappointed. I mean, here was the first African-American president who was, for gosh sake, was a community organizer at one point. I mean, this is the dream progressive candidate. And frankly, he didn't have a very progressive agenda. A lot of folks are disappointed with what ended up being a giveaway to the health insurance companies. Guantanamo Bay is still open. It's a foreign policy that's still based on violence and war. That was, if he couldn't get things done, if he couldn't move a progressive agenda in the system as it's currently set up, what's to say that Bernie Sanders is going to be?
That's a very good point. I like to say one thing, though. I like to say there's a president, and then there's a presidency. And the presidency has gravity, the gravity that supersedes the president. And I don't want to give President Obama a pass in any way, but at the same time, what I want to say is that the left brought somebody in, and then they said, okay, we did it. And after we did it, the pressure left. And there's something that I don't remember which president it was that says,
Roosevelt.
yeah,
I think I
make
know where you're
me do it. In other words, don't put me there and then say do it. Make me do it.
And that's exactly the kind of candidacy and presidency that Bernie is achieving. That's the kind of campaign that he's running. And now, 2008 was my first time to actually be able to vote in the presidential election. And I heard this rhetoric, and I saw a vision for America, and I saw a lot of essential qualities about, the pathos of what he was running on. And it energized me, and it awakened me in a political way. And then in 2012, I was so apathetic by that point in time because that didn't cash in, that I didn't vote. And I mean, now the electorate knows the difference between someone who's going to equivocate and between someone who is going to give you a certain type of rhetoric and someone that's actually going to tell you, this is my policy, this is the 12 initiatives that I have, this is how I voted for the last 40 years, this is my plan, this is how I'm going to actualize this vision.
Laura?
And that's what Bernie Sanders is.
What are your thoughts?
Well, just that rhetoric is one step in the process, and honestly, since 2011, I've been tremendously encouraged to see the public rhetoric shift left with, all the pressure from Occupy Wall Street, greater articulation of, community perspectives, especially with related to Black Lives Matter and the gross abuse of authority that is just rampant within our governmental structure, but. People have been trying to fight this fight from a lot of angles for a lot of years. And, there's just, some of us have come to this point of view that, we're going to build our own vehicle and, it's pretty straightforward. Our 4 pillars are peace, grassroots democracy, ecological wisdom, and social justice. And I think that that's a vision that, we can all get behind.
I was doing some research for this topic, and I came across a quote that really struck me from Dennis Kucinich's former press secretary during some of his attempts to get the candidacy for the Democratic Party. He says, quote, "The best place to put our resources is into uncorrupted, principled, policy-driven, nonviolent, creative activism," and which sounds to me like a pretty big sign-off away from the world of working, at least inside the Democratic Party, and possibly electoral politics altogether. What are our thoughts about that?
Luckily, we have somebody running for Democratic nomination that's the longest-serving congressional independent in American history. So something that we're seeing both in the Republican National Convention and in the Democratic National Convention and otherwise is a fight between the establishment and what, could be considered outsiders. That's what's going on here. I mean, the Democratic National Convention has only set 6 debates, and I think in 2008 there were 26.
Yeah.
There is very clearly a war going on implicitly within the Democratic National Convention for sure. And
Bernie Sanders is actually circulating a petition right now to try and get more debates into the mix. And I think what the sense is that if you do not make sure that everyone has their fair say in the process, then it will go to whoever has sort of that establishment support, And in this case, it seems to be Hillary is the one they want to run. But I think that that the people are more in line with what Bernie has to say on issues. So.
You saw a similar dynamic with the way Ron Paul was excluded in the Republican Party in the last cycle. I mean, just in terms of a non-establishment candidate being marginalized. And, and so that's almost in a way to be expected. But I think that when you see nearly 2/3 of the electorate completely disengaged, and you start to see crossover between principled conservatives and progressives, and people really starting to come together and say, this left-right paradigm doesn't really work anymore. We can come together as decent human beings and talk about things reasonably and not buy the media poison that is constantly polarizing. And, and eventually the pressure is going to break through. So something's going to give.
I don't even know if the debates matter anymore. And I know Bernie wants to have more debates, But, you know, I would do well not to have debates and have Bernie go around and speak to 10 bloggers a day. You know, Bernie could go around the country and he could Skype and he could do all these avenues to reach people. When he starts doing things like that, operating outside of the box, watch how quickly, in other words, something that even President Obama tried when he was trying to move some of his programs, and that is go to YouTube, go to some of the personalities on YouTube that have a couple million people, hit 30 or 40 of those in a month. And guess what you have? You have more coverage that's more direct than broadcast media, which is what these guys are going to be dependent on.
And it's definitely true. I think traditionally you had to appeal to mainstream media to get your message out there.
To gatekeepers, effectively.
Right, exactly. And now we are in a situation where I think it is probably fair to say that at least the last election was fairly well decided in large part by social media.
Doesn't this almost argue towards a concept of breaking the two-party system apart? Okay, we no longer need to have access to these limited media channels,
right,
which is one of the things that the two parties really gave you access to. Now we just get on YouTube and we can connect with 40 million people.
Right.
Doesn't that almost lead to a decentralization of the political system?
Yes.
And I think probably it should.
Exactly.
You know, when you narrow people's options down to who can, like, I don't know for sure what his reasons for running as a Democrat this time were, but Bernie is running as a Democrat when he's really an independent, and I think it's because there is that sense that you can't get elected if you're not one of those.
I'm not going to attempt to read Bernie Sanders' mind, but I'm going to quote him now at this point to try to put some perspective on why he's running as a Democrat. He says, quote, "I will not be a spoiler." Laura, a lot of people still think that the 2000 election was spoiled by Ralph Nader and the Green Party.
Yeah, we get that question a lot, but the truth of the matter is actually more registered Democrats in Florida jumped ship and voted the opposite direction than would have made a difference. It's just patently not true that Greens are spoilers at all. And quite frankly, I think it's a bit presumptuous to assume that Green votes are necessarily Democratic votes, because once again, we're trying to appeal to the disenfranchised electorate that does not feel motivated to vote for the establishment parties as they are. So, you know, the Democrats, I'm surprised they're not doing better against what the Republicans are putting up. So
The clown car.
yeah, the clown car of the Republicans.
It's interesting. In a town in California right now, we are starting to see that mixture of Green and Democrats occurring. I don't remember that. Richmond, California, I believe. There is now a Green mayor, I believe it is.
Well, she's left office now, but that was Gail McLaughlin, yes.
She was a Green mayor that was brought into office through Democratic support. So, I mean, I think you're going to start seeing alliances like that to get things moving forward. And I think that's a good thing, because the reality is, I am one of those people who read platforms, and I've read the Democratic platform and I've read the Green platform, and you take a look at them, they're not really very different.
But how much do platforms mean if the behavior of
You're correct.
the elected officials
I agree.
deviates wildly from what they say they're going to do?
I agree.
Right.
I agree with that. But when we're talking about structure, that's all we have, right? The platform is all that defines what your party is.
Well, principled cooperation is absolutely where we have to start. The issues that we face as humanity, as a species, as the planet, are all so much more important than the little petty disagreements that we might get into. I mean, we were talking about in the green room, the time is now. If we do not get off of our toxic fossil fuel economy, poisoning the environment, converting to renewables, work out some kind of socially just system where we can cooperate and live together, that's it. You know, we're just done as a planet. I mean, and the window is only so big, or is only so long, for us to start behaving intelligently as a species.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the concept of resources and petty arguments, because a lot of folks support Bernie Sanders, and it's wholehearted and it's honest, and a lot of folks are kind of saying, well, I don't know about Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Party, and that's also a genuine position, because people want to use resources effectively. And the concerns of folks that are not supporting Bernie and the Democratic Party are that, you know, all the money he's going to raise and all of the organization and the people power he's going to put together, if he doesn't get the nomination, is just going to be wasted. What are our thoughts about that? I mean, if it's as much as $50 million, the Green Party could build an entire organization and it would survive the election. If he raises and spends $50 million and doesn't get the candidacy, it's just gone.
I can't speak to what the campaign has in mind for what they're going to do after if he does not get the nomination, but I think that it's probably fair to say that the social network supporting Bernie Sanders, at least, will translate over into helping him support his issues until he has another opportunity to run. And I think that Bernie has been the first person to say it, that this is not about him, it's about all of us. It has to be a grassroots movement. And I think that that attitude is already sort of paying dividends in that a lot of people are looking at this like, well, we're going to go out there and we're going to support what we think is right. We're going to support Bernie, but it's more about the movement of it, the revolution of it, if you will. We're trying to change this system, and we're going to do it whether or not Bernie gets elected.
So Lane, you feel that this organization put together ostensibly to vote Bernie into being the candidate will survive this election?
I think so.
Because the campaign is about the larger, broader people of America and by extension the world as a leader in the world stage. And what a perfect expression of the democratic socialist movement to have an egoless campaign by design. Right. To have a campaign that says, I am for you, I'm for all of you, I'm not just for some of you. And if you look at how he's voted and you look at how he's been active throughout the decades, and you look at some of the things that he was saying on the Senate floor and on the floor of Congress for the last, 40 years, I mean, it is all about the movement, and the sleeper awakens, and it is awakening right now, and it's not going to go back to sleep.
I think it's very interesting that this candidate, Bernie, he has the voting record. When he says something, he generally, in fact, the vast majority of the time, when he says something, he votes that way. And there are a lot of other people who are running right now they will say one thing and they will go another way on it.
Who can't lie straight in bed.
Yeah, exactly.
Laura, what are your thoughts about this concept that the organization and the money for Bernie may be for nothing?
Well, that's a very real risk that I see. My sincere hope is that people of conscience who really want to see things change will come over and lend some support to the Green Party. I can tell you right now, we could wrap up ballot access in the rest of the nation for $750,000. So,
for less than $1 million.
But we're scraping and clawing to nail down ballot access. So just some of this momentum, standing up to say we're going to build an alternative structure if the Democratic Party does not cooperate would be an incredible boon. And I have to say one more thing, which is just really exciting because I've just found this out. Houston is going to be the site for the Green Party U.S. Presidential Nominating Convention in 2016.
Is it going to be, or is it one
Really?
of two finalists?
It was one of two finalists, and my understanding is that the voting's just wrapping up and that we have pulled it out.
Wow.
So
Wow.
very
That's awesome.
exciting stuff.
Good work.
Thank you.
Egberto, I'm sure we'll be covering that here coming up in the months to come. But Egberto, what are your thoughts about resources? Organizational time, money spent.
Look, I believe that we have to do whatever it takes. I think the money that's been spent by, and first of all, I don't speak for the Bernie campaign.
Absolutely not.
But I don't, the money that he collects, I don't know what he does with it if he doesn't make it. But I don't think any of that can be considered money's wasted because it's the people's money. It's the people who had faith in this guy and wanted this guy to be elected, to be the representative. What do we do with that money, or what do I think he should do with that money? Believe it or not, I think he should start start shopping around. And what do I mean by shopping around? Am I going to get my platform or not? Am I going to get involved or not? Then I would use it if I really have a seat at the table. Then I'll go ahead and invest that way. But if I don't have a seat on the table and it's made clear, hello, Laura. How are you? So, I mean,
Right.
but I'm serious about that. You know, these are times, as I think everybody around here said, that these are serious times. And if we don't get a movement, or if the movement is not acknowledged, if the movement is not given a chance to grow, then we do whatever is necessary to grow the movement. I am a true Democrat. But before I'm a Democrat, I'm an American. And before I'm an American, I'm a human. And what I want to do is whatever is necessary to move all of us forward and not let any party get involved in bringing us down or telling any one of us that we're less than. And that's what's been happening over the last several decades.
It's a divisive tactic that encourages the power structures that are to continue to proliferate. And he is totally an iconoclast to...
Talking about Bernie.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders is an iconoclast and has been for decades to the power structures. Direct action, activism, protesting, telling people straight to their face. You know, there's so much video, and just listening to him speak, you know, from the Senate floor, from Congress floor, and he is speaking with the people's megaphone.
You know, I don't want to get too much into, you know, the depths of his policy positions, but he is attacked by some on the left for some of his foreign policy positions. And I'm thinking specifically of voting to authorize military force in Afghanistan. He did vote against the war in Iraq, but he did support the war in Afghanistan. He has been a staunch supporter of the government of Israel and perpetrating its violence on the Palestinian people. And a lot of progressives fault him for that. What are our thoughts about
I'm
foreign policy?
sure that we will see, as the campaign rolls out here in the primaries, a more direct addressing of that. So I want to be cautious with responding to that particular issue. But I will say that, you know, he has been a vocal supporter of a two-state solution specifically for Israel. I don't think that the man will countenance and tolerate war crimes. And, you know, especially coming out of Bush for 8 years and the current military paradigm of drone strikes and just, I mean, the escalation that we're seeing is really tenable. And I honestly don't think that we will see the same thing from Bernie Sanders. I think we'll see a de-escalation, and we'll see a reallocation of the resources that we use for a hyperinflated military for the betterment of the people. He's a very domestically minded individual.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know, even with his international policy, right? I mean, like I said, there's a president and the presidency. I do believe he, as Taylor said, he's more a domestic person. But whatever the case may be, the mistake that was made by the grassroots during the for the Obama presidency, I don't think would be repeated under a Bernie Sanders presidency. In other words, the whole idea is remain engaged, and remaining engaged means if there's a particular policy that one doesn't want, the grassroots ensures that it doesn't happen.
So meaning it's not about getting the person into a particular place and then leaving them there for 4 years, like a little wind-up toy.
Right.
It's something that you've got to remain dedicated and involved in.
Right.
Make
To
continued
get them
demands.
to do what you want them to do.
Right.
Because we got Obama into office, and he immediately turned around and shook hands with Mitch McConnell and appointed a corporate trial lawyer with the express intention of prosecuting people that essentially orchestrated the collapse of our economy in 2008. And wasn't a single prosecution. There were minimal fines, but we're talking, you know, people that make trillions of dollars, that comprise 60% of our GDP. Billions of dollars is nothing. It's a pittance. And I am interested to see, and he's already kind of speculated about what his cabinet would look like.
Talk about Bernie again.
Yeah, absolutely. He's already speculated about what his cabinet would look like, and, you know, Robert Reich has been thrown around. Imagine who his attorney general would be. Imagine the kind of people that we would see be put into positions of bureaucratic power within his administration. You would not see Goldman Sachs executives there. You would not see, Morgan Stanley representatives within his cabinet.
One would hope.
Right. The revolving door would cease to spin.
And that is what one would have to hope. Because that's why you have to have a grassroots movement, because the plutocracy is going to see that, and the fear that they are going to have of what that cabinet is going to look like means you have to have a movement. And actually, I think Bernie has said that and you either have a movement or you don't have a Bernie. You have to have a movement.
Laura, what are your thoughts about this concept that if we get one person in with a grassroots movement in the party, we'll see an immediate improvement? Is it possible for a grassroots movement to flourish and exert itself in a structure like the Democratic Party?
Well, I've never been active with the Democratic Party, so I don't want to say that I can speak to that. I can only say that growing up myself, I always considered myself independent, and my observation was that the agenda sort of continued on unchecked, regardless of whether there were Republicans or Democrats in office, that the momentum of the state just sort of continued and lumbered on. There are things about Sanders' positions that are appealing to me. I have problems somewhat, with certain positions, but, so I'm not really out to criticize him. I want to build bridges with people of conscience. But I don't have optimism for that, for building inside the Democratic Party, which is why, to me, the very most fundamental constructive thing that I can do is to try to build an alternative. And so, and so for people who've committed themselves to the Greens, that's where we're at.
I was just going to say that I think that one of the things that does not get, I think, enough press, for obvious reasons, is that there is this massive industry of lobbyists in Washington who have an unlimited amount of money that can do anything, really, they want. And we as the American people, if we want to compete with that, we have to be louder than those people. We have to be louder from the opposite end of the country, And I think that in the present climate with the technology we have at our disposal, social media, it is totally possible to do that. And that is, we have seen the power of social media in the political process already, and it's only growing. And I think that now there is I will characterize it as a desperation for an alternative. And that was what got Obama elected, I feel. And I think that is what is going to get Bernie Sanders elected. And he can get away with not having this vast amount of money backing him because he has the support of the people out there. And the movement is self-sustaining at this point. That's why I say it'll continue even if he doesn't get elected.
We've got less than 2 minutes left. I'm going to go to Laura and then Egberto. Laura, what are your hopes? And we're a long way out. What are your hopes for the 2016 election and the Green Party?
Well, for the Green Party as a whole, I hope we achieve the greatest ballot access that we've ever had before, and I think that we will. We're well on track to do that. Jill Stein's campaign has made federal matching funds a full year in the cycle earlier than it did in the previous election cycle, so that's very encouraging. And I think the most important thing is to bring the public interest forward. Corporate interests are very organized. They're very good at putting forward their agenda with our government entities, and we have to do a better job of articulating the public interest.
Egberto, what are your hopes for the 2016 election?
My big hope is engagement. Everybody here speaks about the 2/3 of people that don't vote. I want to get them engaged. My passion is to talk to people and talk to people about their own self-worth, because I think with self-worth comes the feeling that your vote matters, and I want them out there knowing that their vote matters.
Egberto Willies, I'll have to let that be the last word. Egberto is a blogger and radio host of the show Politics Done Right on KPFT. We've also been joined by Lane Brozgal. He is a moderator for the Houston for Sanders group. Also with us tonight has been Taylor Channing. He is with the Bernie 2016 TV. And we've also been joined by Laura Palmer, who is the co-chair of the Green Party of Texas. Thank you very much for being on the program with us.
Thanks
For everyone
Thanks
here at
for having
Green
us.
Watch, this is your world. Take care of it.
And we're out.
I feel like this is the point where we're supposed to be like,
Yes.